again, I have to start this thing 3 times. It seems to be a thing. Three. I've always had a thing with the number three. So now I'm skipping forward to school. Basically, now we're in California. I do remember being scared all the time when I was before school. Um, but there was good times too. It got much worse when I started school. So now we're in California, and I started school. I told you my parents are very religious, so we mostly went to school at Christian schools. So my mom would, we weren't by any stretch of the imagination wealthy, so um, my dad always refused to join the union because of his political beliefs. So you can make very good money as a carpenter. You can make very decent money as a carpenter um, if you join the union. If not, good luck. And then carpenters work and then they don't work. If you're your own contractor. I mean, my dad is not a contractor. He was basically doing his own illegal contracts because he didn't have a contracting license. But you have work. The work ends. You have to go find another job. If you work for the union, they keep you going. So there was a lot of times where we didn't have any income. My dad would work and then not work, work and then not work, and we're pretty fucking poor. So my mom would work for this school teaching, and um, in order to pay for the tuition for us four children. The issue with that is that my dad is also a contrary person. So even though we were in one of the strictest Baptist denominations that exist, that a lot of people consider a cult, inside and outside, well, not inside, former members and people who study religions consider that denomination to be a cult. But my dad was far right of those far right people, and he would get angry that the pastor did something liberal and quit the church. So there was times starting in like fourth grade that I went to public school for a while until my dad found another church, and I went back to Christian school. So I kind of bounced back and forth for a little bit until through junior high through my junior year of high school, I went to public school. And then my very last year of high school, I went back to a Christian school and graduated from a Christian school, and then went to a Bible college. But I want to go all the way back. I'm going to rewind to kindergarten. I went to a Christian kindergarten, and I started in fourth grade at 4 years old because my mom is teaching school to pay for my three siblings' tuition, and you didn't take your kids to a daycare in the 70s or early 80s. This is like 81. They didn't really exist, and we definitely didn't have money for a nanny in those days. Somebody stayed home, or you left your kids with grandma or something, and my grandma was fucking nuts. I'll get to her. So I started kindergarten a year early, just basically as free babysitting while my mom taught school. And I could not sit still. When I got tested for ADHD about 5 years ago, it literally it was like off the chart. To test for ADHD, it's a very, very simple test. They just flash numbers at you, letters at you on a screen, and they give you a letter, and you're supposed to push the button for each letter except for the letter that they give you. And my letter was E, and I managed not to push the button one time. So like I'm very, very ADHD, and I was very hyper, and I just did not understand the entire concept of school or why these people were sitting over there talking. I would just play with the toys constantly, and because I guess for whatever reason, the politics. My dad was a deacon. I don't fucking know. The teacher was a softie. She just let me do that. So I literally failed kindergarten and had to do kindergarten again. And this time I had a hard ass teacher, and I still could not sit still. I got detention every single day. And so this is what I was talking about in a little bit in my last video, is that I would get spanked at school. I would get spanked by my mom when I got home. Sometimes at school because she was there, right? And I would get spanked by my dad when he got home. Every single day. And that lasted from 2 years of kindergarten, because I failed kindergarten twice, through first grade, partly into second grade, where I started learning to be able to control my behavior, started masking, basically, in order to not get beat all the fucking time. But when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, you don't really have, and you're ADHD, you don't really have the ability, and already highly traumatized, you don't really have the ability to modify your behavior that well. So they were asking a lot of me, basically. And the school system sucks, and that's, later on, my bachelor's degree is in education, and it's trauma to expect a child, any child, to sit still for 8 hours a day. That's not normal child behavior, 6 hours a day. But especially a child with ADHD, like, that's just not going to fucking happen, you know? And then we tell the child that they're bad for not being able to do that. We're dumb for asking them to do that and expecting that out of them, and we are cruel for then blaming the child for that. The education system is cruel, okay? But adding on top of that, I'm physically getting beat over this 3 times a day. So by the time I'm halfway through second grade, I am a model child, you know, very quiet. All the silliness is gone. Still couldn't fucking talking. It's like I've never been able to. Part of a neurodivergent behavior. I was just talking to one of my partners about this a couple days ago. As part of neurodivergent behavior is not being able to modify the volume of your voice. I was an adult when I learned to do that, and I'm still not great at it. And I have a deep voice, so even as a child, I mean, I didn't have a deep voice like this, but even for a child, I always had a pretty deep voice. My voice has always resonated. So, you know, one of those kids talks too much in class. I could never fucking I couldn't whisper to the other kids and get away with it. I couldn't, you know, like I was always getting, even after second grade, where I at least was not getting beat every day. I was at least getting spanked once a week for my behavior at school. And it's not that I wasn't intelligent, because once school clicked for me, I was like straight A's. So I failed kindergarten at 4 years old. I failed kindergarten at 5 years old. At 6 years old, I did kindergarten and first grade all in 1 year. And then I was caught up. So I graduated on time. But I have the high distinction of failing kindergarten twice. And to add to that this is the 80s. Nobody gave a shit about bullying. Bullying was your fucking problem. I'm still interested in knowing why. Someday I'm going to look this up, why kids commit suicide about it today. Because I don't remember. Maybe it just wasn't in the news. Maybe we weren't told when that happens. I don't remember it ever happening. But bullying was bad, and nobody gave a fuck. The adults did not care. My dad would tell me if I got beat up at school that it was my fault. You know, he would always say, if nobody likes you, the common equation in that is you. Um, shit, that's something to tell to somebody, kid who's 6 years old, isn't it? And so I would get picked on, bullied at school. I was weird. I just found out last year that I'm on the spectrum. I wasn't a nerd in that I was like into D&D and comic books and shit because I wasn't allowed those things. Those were all of the devil. We weren't allowed to really watch TV without my parents present. We weren't allowed to listen to any music that wasn't approved, which was mostly Christian music. And, we were white trash, so we listened to gospel bluegrass and um, southern gospel and stuff like that. You just picture hillbilly music, but with Jesus. And classical. And because my mom was rebellious a little bit against my dad, she would listen to the songs that she grew up on. My parents are quite a bit older than me. So she would listen to the music that she grew up on when my dad wasn't around. So she's all wild and rebellious. So she would listen to, like lounge music, like the Rat Pack, the Frank Sinatra and all them. So I had heard a little bit of that when I was a kid, a little bit of Elvis Presley and stuff, which by then was, I'm not that old. Well, I guess I am, but I'm not as old as Frank Sinatra. Like that, that was music from my mom's childhood in like the 50s, right? So by the time I'm being exposed to this music, it's already old. I mean, this is the 70s. There's fucking heavy metal and hard rock that I am completely unaware of. Hip hop is already out. Didn't hear a hip hop song until the late 90s. I was very, very sheltered. We didn't ever go to the movies. I went to the movies one time to see The Great Mouse Detective, and that was for a friend's birthday. The movies we watched at home were like black and white movies or musicals. For some reason, they were allowed. My sisters, like, shit, I've seen every Pollyanna movie, Anne of Green Gables, the woman with the curly hair, the girl, I'll have to look up her name. I've seen all of her movies. Just, like The Music Man, stuff like this. Fred Astaire, of course. All the John Wayne movies and stuff like that. Westerns. And I'm growing up in the 80s, so I'm not, and I'm watching movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, so I have no idea. I'm very sheltered, very removed from my own culture and the times that I grew up in. So when I went to fourth grade and something happened at the church we were going to, I don't remember what it was. I don't think they ever told me. It was all hush hush, drama, scandal, secret. And my dad stopped going to that church, and I went to public school. Holy fuck, I was weird to these kids. I didn't know anything about pop music, didn't know anything about pop culture. And this is the 80s when, like, still to this day, people are like, 80s was the height of pop culture. Well, I mean, I grew up in the 80s when it was I didn't know who Michael Jackson was. I didn't know who Madonna was. I did not see any of the movies that came out during that time when I was growing up. Very sheltered. And it's not like we were Mennonites living out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, Hesperia was a small town at that time. But it's still fucking California, it's still, like, we have TVs and shit. So it's very, so the bullying turned into not just getting picked on, but getting beat up. Often every day. And I was a small kid. It's funny because I'm 6'3" now, but I was really small. I grew all at once. So I was 4 foot tall when I hit 8th grade. When I entered 7th grade, by the time by the time I left seventh grade, I was 6 foot tall. I did all my growing very fast, and it was very painful. Um, but like being 4 foot tall going into seventh grade, man, I was getting fucking beat up, you know. And so from fourth grade to junior high, I bounced back and forth to from public school, Christian school, public school, Christian school, and then I was just at public school from junior high, from seventh grade to 11th grade. So fourth grade when I first went to public school, fuck, I was getting beat up all the time, um, ridiculed. Then, you know, my brother is 5 years older than me, so he's a teenager at this time, and he's but my brother's sexy, you know. He's popular. He had for some reason my dad let my brother do whatever he wanted to do. He was very strict with the rest of us, so my brother had girlfriends. None of the rest of us were allowed to date. Um, you know, he played football at the local public high school, and he was good. And he was popular at church. He was popular at school. He had friends. He would go hang out with his friends. None of the rest of us did this. He had a car when he was 16, 15. None of the rest of us had cars or were allowed to drive. So I don't know why my brother was the golden child, and he doesn't know why either. But um, but he was, you know, tormenting his little brother. So I didn't have any relief when I got home. I would basically be picked on at school all day. Um, go home and my brother would be fucking with me because I was a nerd and a dork, and my brother's fucking cool and I'm not. And then my dad would get home and yell at me or beat me, you know, about something. And somewhere along the line there, my mom is screaming at me about something. My mom hit me, but not often, but she screamed. She screamed a lot. Um, so after second grade, you know, into third, fourth grade, I had modified my behavior so I'm not getting beat all the time by my father. I'm still getting beat, but just not every day. But then from fourth grade through seventh grade, I'm getting picked on it. I'm beat up at school all the time, sometimes every day. It was like high stress to try to avoid the bullies throughout the school day, and then going home from school. There was no, it's a small town, there wasn't any buses, and I didn't live far away from the school, so I would either walk or ride my bike. And I was like, um, using deep analysis every day to try to figure out where the bullies are and go around them to get home, sometimes way out of my way to try to avoid getting beat up because they would like wait for me outside the school, um, almost every day, and they would beat me up if they caught me. Um, and it didn't help that I was by far the most intelligent kid in the class. I was always the teacher's pet. And it's not like, to me, probably most of my teachers were probably the only people that treated me like a person, that valued my skill set, which is mostly my mind. You know, I've never been a good hands-on person. I've never been good at sports, but I'm fucking smart. And I was always straight A's, always the kid. Like, me and the teachers would often be having our own fucking discussions, and other kids would just have no idea what was going on. Always answering the questions right, and always the second smartest person in class. There was always a girl that was more intelligent than me, but I'll take number two. You know, not bad, straight A's. And I knew from about fifth grade, I want to say, that education was my way out of the fucking nightmare that my life was. So at that point in time, my parents never had to be on me about my grades ever again. I was extremely studious, understanding that the only way out of this fucking shit of a life that I was in was to go to college and get enough money to get away, you know. And so, I mean, before that, of course, I'd get spanked over anything less than an A. Um, but no, you know, like nobody had to discipline me after like fifth grade about my grades. And seventh grade is when I started learning to mask around my peers. So I, you know, that started very young with my father and mother. About first grade, I started learning to mask, and but then around seventh grade, it was around my peers and learning like, okay, I am weird. I didn't know I was neurodivergent. I didn't know I was ADHD. I did not know I was on the spectrum. Um, you know, being part of my dad to this day does not like believe in psychology. I don't know how you don't believe in psychology, but so I just didn't want to get picked on and beat up all the time, and I also wanted fucking friends. I had friends at church, but um, you know, two, I wasn't extremely popular at church either. I had two friends who were JD and Eric, who were just as weird as me, but we were definitely, even at church, we were the outcasts, and um, and I had no friends at school, and so I was, you know, a pretty lonely kid, and I read a lot to escape, and my siblings were all older, so they didn't really like my brother. They played with me sometimes, but not a lot, terribly. And so I was just, and we had my dad also. I grew up in Hesperia. I live in Hesperia, so we also had an acre of land. So I spent a lot of time outside, in the backyard playing, just being away from everybody. And one of my friends, Eric, didn't live too far away from me, so I would go over to his house whenever I was allowed to. My mom, when my dad wasn't around, my mom was more lenient. So at a very young age, I would walk to the library, and it was like 3 miles from my house. Um, and that's one of those things that like Gen Xers look at millennials and Gen Zers, and we're like, y'all are sheltered because even my kids like don't really go outside that much. Don't hang out with their friends. Don't. We were always at each other's houses, constantly. Um, and for me, it was just a way to not be at home. So my friend JD lived the next town over, so I didn't get to hang out with him as much. But me and Eric were always at each other's houses, and I was more at his house because I was trying to get away from my parents. Um, but starting in seventh grade, I was tired of being a nerd. I was tired of being beat up and bullied, picked on. So that's when I started really analyzing other people's behavior and copying it. And by the time I graduated from high school, I was pretty popular. Not ever one of the cool kids, but at that point in time, I had friends. I had a girlfriend, um, two actually. I guess I've always been polyamorous because I had a girlfriend at public school that I went to, and a girlfriend at church, and always felt guilty about that because I didn't know that polyamory was a thing that existed, you know. And and of course, like I didn't lose my virginity until well past 18 because I was so scared of sex. Um, because I wasn't just dragged to church like my brother was. I don't think my brother was ever really into it, but I was into it at a very young age, and beginning at like 12, I think, my um, started thinking about wanting to become a preacher, and then at 14, I was called to the ministry. That's the way they say it. And so I was very into church, and I like 100% believed all this stuff. And, so I remember being fucking, like, liking girls a lot. And some boys, because I'm also, pansexual, but being gay was very, very, very verboten in the Christian church, in the Baptist church. So I didn't really agonize about those feelings at all, because I was also interested in girls. So I would just focus on that, and not so I didn't feel guilty about it. But God, I never even touched a girl until I was like 14, and even then it was bad. Like, I kissed a girl. That's how much of a rebel I was. And that would have been like, my dad would have beat the shit out of me if he ever found out that I kissed a girl. So learning to mask heavily worked for me. It worked. I was able to have a girlfriend, have friends, be more accepted and less picked on. Didn't ever completely go away. And as far as at home, that's when the anger started, because no matter how hard I tried, the rules always changed. All I can do to describe to you about my home life is tell you, random stories, that, like, I remember we had a small house, 3-bedroom house. Girls were in one room, boys were in the other room, and my parents had a room. And we had one bathroom for 6 people. And it's the 80s, and I have 2 teenage sisters. So the amount of time they spent in the fucking bathroom before church getting ready, and when you walked in there, the Aquanet, just like, there was just like a cloud of Aquanet hairspray from that big 80s puffy hairdo. And I was the last one, so I was the youngest, so I got into the bathroom last. So I remember just like sitting there before church in the hallway for an hour waiting for both my sisters to get out of the bathroom. And then I had just barely gotten into the bathroom, and 3 minutes later, my dad was busting down the door, grabbed me, and kicked me with his steel-toe boots down the fucking hallway, because everybody else was ready for church and I was holding everybody up. Going to work with my dad, starting at age 12, during the summer and over the weekends, and him never explaining anything to me. He was a carpenter, and so he never taught me anything. He never explained anything to me. He would just, like, go grab a 2x4. There's a big ass pile of lumber over here. They take this. There's a semi truck just of all this lumber wrapped up, and then they just dump it. And the construction workers have to sort through it and organize it really before they start working. And my dad would just go get me about a 2x4. Go get me. I don't know what the fuck that is. And then he would hit me. And then like, backhand me. And he was a strong dude. And he was typically the only white guy there. I guess he mostly hired illegal immigrants, because every time INS came through, INS is like the in the 80s, that's what the Department of Homeland Security is today. And so they were pretty aggressive back then, and they would come running through any blue-collar job site. And me and my dad and my brother, if he was there, would be the only ones standing there, like we're building a house by our fucking selves. And so my dad was usually the foreman, so I guess he did that. I don't really know. I never asked him about it. I never asked my dad about anything. He's not the kind of person you ask questions to. And so it's not like anybody, these illegal immigrants, and I mean no disrespect, it's just like, that's my dad, just an asshole white dude taking advantage of people like normal, right? But I'm not, they're not going to fucking say anything against the foreman and smacking his kid. They're not going to, let me stand up and do the right thing. And again, it's the 80s. Mostly people don't fucking care. Um, there's several times he would like demand that we run all day long. Like my dad was such a workaholic. We would be there on the job site before it got light out, and he would just sit there. Like we would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go to work, and we would just sit there until daylight hit, and so we could be working. The rest of the crew didn't even show up till like 7, 8 o'clock. Nobody's fucking like my dad had a very bizarre sense of like the most extreme workaholic I've ever met in my life. And it's not like everybody else is good at they're going to show up to work when it's time to work, you know. And then my dad would work until it got dark, and he would only stop to drink some water, shove lunch down his fucking face, and then just keep working. And he, in his 40s now, is like continuously running, and just I don't know. I have no idea why he works so hard. He's still to this day. He's in his 80s now. He still has not learned to sit the fuck down. And if we move too slow for him, me and my brother, several times he hit us with whatever he you know, he had very short temper, so whatever he had in his hand, he'd hit us with it. And sometimes that was boards. So he broke 2x4 across my back several times. He hit me hard enough with it that it broke. But he would hit us with boards or whatever. He happened to have in his hand, never with like a fucking hammer or anything. I did have an uncle who my grandfather hit him in the head with a hammer, so he was mentally disabled for the rest of his life. So luckily I didn't get hit that bad ever. But going back to the house, like, no matter how good I tried to be, my dad would just beat me over something. Like, there was not established standards of behavior. There was not rules. It just, whatever the fuck irritated him at the time, you know, and it's not like he could state his rules to us. We followed his rules and we would not get in trouble. So, no matter how hard I tried, I could never meet his standards. I could never not get beat or screamed at or insulted or whatever. And so that's when I started being like fucking angry. And that went all the way up until I was 14 and stood up to my dad. And very surprised when he backed down. I did not expect him to. I expected to get the life beat out of me. I didn't hit him. Jim, my brother hit him, but I never hit him. But fuck, I wanted to. He tried to start a fight with me later on. When I was in my 30s. He literally tried to start a fight with me, and I wanted to hit him so bad, but I did not. But when I was 14, I ran away from home. I literally stole my parents' car and a little bit of money, and was trying to drive out to my sister's house in Colorado. And I was just a very sheltered kid who had no idea about how the way the world worked. I didn't know how to drive. I learned how to drive when I was 12. My brother would go out and hang out with his friends who lived way out in the country, and they would drink. They would go out in the desert and drink, and he'd tell me to drive him home, you know, and I so that he didn't get in trouble or anything. And I was like fucking 12, so my brother basically taught me how to drive, so he can get away with drinking and sneak it around from my dad. And so I get to like New Mexico and run out of gas, and I'm thinking to myself, I mean, run out of money for gas. I had some money. I'm thinking to myself that I'll get up the next morning and just look around for work and work for a day or two, and then try to get enough money to put gas in the tank. This is still 1990, I believe. So no cell phones, no internet yet, and so I did stop wherever I was. There was a house there, so I just went in, knocked on the door, and said, "Hey, can I just use your phone?" And I just called my mom just to let her know that I was okay, alive and okay. I was very naive about the way the world works, so they fucking, whatever they say about on TV where they need 2 minutes to trace you, no, the fuck they don't. The guy that answered the door and let me use his phone must have been known that I was lying to him, because he gave me some food, and I went and was sleeping in my car, and I barely fell asleep when a cop is hauling me off and arrested me and took me back to the house. And that's when I got back, I told my pastor. My pastor asked me why I ran away. Actually, my pastor came and got me out of juvie, and he asked me why on the way back, and I told him my dad is hitting me, and he just made excuses. That was not the first time I tried to tell somebody and try to get help. The church believes that the Baptist church believes that the father he is in the place of God in the home. He can basically do what he wants, and it's nobody's business to tell him he can't. So I told my youth pastors, I've told past pastors, and nothing ever happened. CPS, Child Protective Services, came to my house when I was 18, and I asked if I could talk to him outside, and I cussed him out and said, I've been trying to get y'all's attention since I was 12 fucking years old. Now I'm 2 weeks away from graduating high school. What the fuck are you going to do for me? I said, and I did too. I graduated, and then 2 weeks later I was gone. But what the fuck? Wait, are you going to haul me out of school 2 weeks before I graduate? Where are you going to put me? I have, I'll be out of here in a month. What the fuck is this? So I told the pastor why I ran away from home. And then I got home, and of course the first thing was my dad's going to lay into me. But I was like, no, you gotta try to hit me. I'm going to, I'm going to fight back now, because that's why I ran away, because I'm tired of getting hit. And he didn't, and he never touched me after that. He still screamed at me and insulted me, but he never hit me after that. So the physical beatings completely stopped when I was 14. Another aspect of this that I've kind of left out is that the whole gay thing, like for in that brand of Baptist church, being gay is the worst thing you can be. We were taught that it is the unforgivable sin, which is dumb, because the Bible itself says that the unforgivable sin is not accepting the Spirit, because it's like saying, like, if you don't get saved, you can't get saved, right? Like, if you don't believe in God and ask forgiveness, the only unforgivable sin is not asking for forgiveness. That's basically what the Bible says. But we are told that it's being a homosexual. So these people cannot go to heaven. And if they say that they're saved, because we didn't believe that you could lose your salvation. The theology that we believed in was easy believism. So all you have to do was say this magic prayer, and you're saved. And you could not lose your salvation. Some brands of Christian believe that you can lose your salvation. Other brands of Christian believe that you have to believe and also display good works. We did not believe that. But so we didn't believe that you lost your salvation if you became gay. We believed that you were never saved in the first place. You were either lying or you were not true in your heart when you accepted Christ as your personal Savior. You didn't mean it. And my dad was like, picture a Trump supporter now. That was my dad my whole life. So this segment of people who are now a threat to literally national security, trying to take over the country, literally, they've been around for a long time, and they've been organizing for a long time, which is also another reason why I'm doing the Temple of Love, because pagans need to organize. These motherfuckers, this what's happening now in our country is a result of almost 100 years of intent and organization and planning, strategy. And pagans, we're just running around with our thumbs up our asses, hoping for a better day. That's not going to happen. We have to fight. We have to organize. So my dad was very, much about and I'm going to use offensive words here, and I'm trying to paint a picture of what my life was like as a child. So my dad would scream about pinko liberal commie fags all the time. And he would just watch TV and scream. And this is before Fox News. After Fox and Rush Limbaugh came out, it was nothing but Rush Limbaugh and Fox 24 hours a fucking day. And my dad is constantly, still to this day, I mean, not with Rush anymore, he's dead, but just screaming at Fox about the commies and the fags all the time. I don't know how he hasn't dropped over dead from a heart attack. I don't understand, having grown up in that culture and now looking at it from the outside, why you want to be angry all the time. Why is it, if liberals make you mad, why do you just get into their business and aggravate you with what liberals do all the time? Conservatives now annoy me, and liberals annoy me too. I am neither liberal nor conservative, and both sides annoy me, and I just ignore them. I don't ingest things that make me angry. That doesn't make any sense to do. And my dad, to him, the liberals were like, all this thing that I hear now about the liberal plot, the liberal conspiracy. Liberals are more disorganized than the Republicans are. Liberals can't do anything. Liberals can't get shit done. Like, what have liberals done in my goddamn lifetime? There's a couple states now where you can smoke weed and gay marriage is legal. That's about the fuck it, man. That's it. And after all the years of Obama, all the years of Clinton, and now Joe Biden, I don't understand why conservatives hate liberals so much. Liberals can't do anything. They're so all they do is fight amongst themselves. They don't fucking accomplish anything. And but in my dad's head, that anything that's wrong with America is liberals, fags, Mexicans, the whole racism thing. Very racist. But masked it. Like, if there was a black person at church, he'd be polite to them, but there was never a black person inside of our home. My dad owned and ran a business with a black man for years, but that he was never stepped foot inside our house. My dad was always polite to black people to their face, but he would be throwing the insular around inside the house all the time. And but with me specifically, he was always calling me a faggot, and he was always beating me for any slightest conceived femininity. And my dad had a very fourth grade understanding of masculinity. Like, if you check your fingernails like this instead of this, you're gay. Kind of this incel nonsense that you hear nowadays, like this weird definition of masculinity, immature definition of masculinity, and the thought that if you're gay, you're not a man. And my dad was always on me on that and always beat me. And what he said is that he was convinced that because I was the youngest, I was just going to be gay. because his youngest brother, he was convinced that his youngest brother is gay, and his youngest brother was not and is not gay. Has like 8 kids now, but it's weird. And for my dad, being weird is being liberal gay. Like, you know, that anything that is not him is liberal and gay. And my mom's youngest brother was gay and died of AIDS in the 80s. And my dad just had a visceral hatred of any of that. And like, I remember one time we went and visited my mom's family in Indiana, and one of my uncles, because she had 18 brothers and sisters, I think there's only 3 left, because she was one of the younger ones, and she's also in her 80s now. So another one of my uncles, I don't know that side of the family very well, so I don't really remember any other names, but he was also gay. And he was there in somebody's house. My dad met him, shook his hand, left the house, and washed his hands in bleach. I don't know if he was scared of HIV or scared that he was going to catch the gay. So that's what my dad said. My sis, you know, you're not very self-aware when you're a child of your body posture and tone of voice and shit. My sisters tell me that I was a little effeminate as a child. I know that I'm pansexual now, and I've had relationships with pretty much every gender that exists. I mean, that several different genders will say that, because like, who knows, there's an infinity of genders that exist right at this moment in time in history. But I wasn't cognitive of being effeminate as a child. You know, like, I didn't know, but my dad beat the fuck anything that he perceived of as being effeminate. And a lot of times people have asked me today, like, if I go into a gay bar today, people are like, well, you have the appearance of being very, very masculine. What are you doing here? You know, like, I mean, when I'm in a gay bar, they'll be like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I didn't know that I needed to act gay in order to come into a gay bar. Usually what I say is because I like dick, you know, and then they look, but literally, like, all the goofiness was beat out of me, all the femininity was beat out of me. So now in my 40s, like, putting on a pink shirt is me being sassy, you know, and trying to redefine my own masculinity, and because like I was raised with such this hyper, you know, I have to be hyper masculine or I'm literally going to get physically beat. A big one of those, I'm going to go back to when I was younger, is my R's. When I started doing trauma therapy, this was the first thing that I did EMDR on, which is a light therapy that helps you process trauma. So this is, I don't really remember all the beatings, but I remember the bad ones, and this, I think, is one of the worst ones. One of my worst memories is my dad coming into my room and I had a speech impediment, and he would say car, and I would say call, and he would slap me. And we just do that over and over and over again until he got tired of slapping me, or I started crying. And that happened over and over and over again. And so 4th grade, when I went to public school, they were like, this kid has a speech impediment. They put me in speech therapy. The roof of my mouth is higher than normal's. So the speech therapist taught me how to position my tongue to pronounce R's. And then in 2 weeks, I was able to pronounce my R's, or, you know, I fake it. I'm not doing, in my mouth, I'm not doing what you're doing. Okay. All right, so I got interrupted with some business there. I'm going to try to wrap this up because it's my birthday party today and folks are coming over, about to be here. So my dad would beat me because I couldn't pronounce my R's. I went to speech therapy when I was in 4th grade when I first went to public school, and they fixed my speech in 2 weeks. So I still don't, like, I still have a high arch, but it sounds more or less like everybody else's are. That's not the only time my dad beat me for a medically preventable reason. That I wet the bed when I was younger, and my dad beat me because I was a faggot and I was doing it on purpose. I was shaming him and abusing his property by intentionally doing that. And then I later found out I had a yeast infection, and a pill solved it. So, yeah, good times.